Good morning. Welcome to the CREST Network webinar that we hold every Tuesday. This particular one is a Q&A. The questions we've put on here are questions that are asked of us often, and many of them are questions that are asked of us just recently. This is our September Q&A webinar, and so we're going to go ahead and get started here. Bill Giannone is with me also, and he's got 3 or 4 questions to answer that people address to him, and I've got 3 or 4 also. So I'm going to jump right into this. And my first question, I'm asked this quite a few times. Do my marketers need to do something different? Well, there's a yes, and then there's a yes. Where would we be today if we hadn't even considered doing something differently? 4,000 years ago or so, we invented the wheel. And now fast forward today, we have wheels for planes, trains, and automobiles, and virtually thousands of other things. This is an entirely new mentality to consider when you're trying to decide if we should, as marketers, do something different. Many of us have been in the marketing world for many, many years, and it's really hard to change. It's really hard to realize exactly what has changed in business marketing, especially if you're right in the thick of it, right in the middle of the woods. The fact is, the public today doesn't want a sales pitch, which we used to do. They don't want high pressure. They don't need service explanations and technical details. And the consumer can get almost all of those details or specs, anything that they want, on the internet. So you're going to need to reinvent the wheel if you want to be relevant in today's marketing world. Marketers in our restoration industry have to know and understand the issues and the pains and the headaches that their prospects deal with on a daily basis. The question, do marketers need to do something different? I'm going to give you an emphatic yes. Marketing to insurance agents, for example, is no longer about who takes them the best chocolate or donuts or gives them the best tickets to a ball game. That's essentially a bribe, and it's a cheap attempt to buy their love. Most prospects are really resistant to it, and it greatly diminishes your credibility as a marketer. Marketers have to bring real, legitimate value to their client and demonstrate to their client that their marketing style and their marketing effort is different. Your referral clients don't care today about fire, water, smoke, and mold. They don't really care about how much equipment you have. With the dramatically new attitudes and the societal preferences that have evolved, just in the last 2 or 3, up to 5 years, the old time tested process that used to be used for typical marketing, it's broken. It doesn't work anymore, or at least it doesn't work very well anymore. If you want to do something different, you have to reinvent the wheel. It's based on exactly what your referring partner needs and what they expect. The really good news is that reinventing the wheel is already here today. Most self-proclaimed marketing gurus and coaches are still spewing strategies that may have worked fairly well 10 or 15 years ago. But the reality is today, the world has moved on. The world doesn't accept those strategies anymore. You do need to do something different. Billy?
Thank you, Dick.
Boy,
Obviously,
this one's timely.
yeah, obviously with everything going on, especially down where you are, Dick, we've gotten a lot of questions about this. What kind of license do I need to chase work in Florida? Well, we've had many discussions in the past about the concept of chasing work, and I just want to make sure we all understand that if you're leaving your home base uncovered to go do work in Florida, that's a really, really bad recipe for disaster. But we could always talk about that another time, and I'm sure we have in some previous podcasts. The short answer is technically you don't need a license to do restoration work in Florida. Now, I say technically because there are so many aspects of work that we do in regards to storm work after a hurricane in Florida that absolutely require special licensing. For instance, by the time you get into most homes after a hurricane, and this is, I'm telling you this from historical fact, anecdotal stories, and firsthand experience. By the time you get into most buildings, there's already mold that started to build because you have very high temperatures and very high humidities left behind by the remnants of the storm. When these things occur, now you're not just doing demolition, extraction, and cleaning and drying, you're doing mold removal. And in the state of Florida, you need to have a special license to do mold removal. That is very, very important to know, because it doesn't mean that if you have any kind of license in your state, it counts in Florida. Florida is very, very exact about the type of licenses that they allow, and it's only a state-issued license to be a mold company. Second thing you understand, if you're going to do anything structurally to the home, and when I mean structurally, I mean anything that affects the structure or the shoreability of the home, you need to be a licensed contractor. And you can't be a licensed contractor out of state. You need to be a licensed contractor in the state of Florida. So many of you are now probably sitting there saying, okay, I'll just go online and I'll license myself to be a contractor. I just have to fill out a form and pay a fee. It's not that easy. To be a licensed contractor in the state of Florida, you're not allowed to use a P.O. box. You have to have a physical address that is your address. So the only workaround for something like that is for you to partner up with another licensed general contractor in the state of Florida. Now, the state of Florida has two types of general contractor licenses. There is a general contractor's license for simple work, which would be mostly residential. And then there's a different license for a full general contractor who's allowed to do work above 3 or 4 stories. So it is possible for you to partner up with another restoration company who probably already is a general contractor. But just understand, all your paperwork, everything you do has to run through that company. In the past, it has happened in the state of Florida that after a disaster or after a hurricane like this one coming, it has happened where the state will put a temporary waiver on such rules just so that they can get some of that initial work started. In other words, they might say there's a 30-day moratorium on companies that come in from out of state to be able to do emergency services work, which would be your extraction, demolition, cleaning, and drying. That's all they will allow. They certainly won't allow you to do any putbacks. They won't allow you to do any kind of major roofing work, any structural work whatsoever. And again, they won't waive it for the mold. That's a state law that you have to really, really be careful about. So I'm just letting you guys know, be really careful. If you're called in by another company to help them out, that's great. That means that you have somebody there who's probably got a really good funnel of lead sources. So it's going to help you make your trip more profitable. Just be careful and understand that you cannot work with a Georgia or a South Carolina or an Alabama license in the state of Florida, technically. Okay? Keep your eyes and ears peeled. Dick will tell you, as a resident of Florida, the airwaves are going to be filled with commercials from law firms. And they're usually not commercials for law firms where the lawyers were saying, hey, is your insurance company screwing you? We can help you. There's going to be plenty of them. But there's also going to be tons of commercials saying, be careful who you hire. Make sure these people are licensed. Be careful of out-of-state contractors. They do that in Florida on a regular basis. So be very careful about going there. I just hope this has helped you either do the right thing or dissuade you from even going. Thanks, Dick.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, I'm holding my breath because it's supposed to hit our city, our town, community in a 4 or 5 or 6 hours. So my hurricane shutters are going to go up this afternoon for sure. So thanks, Bill. Next question is, should I be using company brochures? I hear all the time about marketers, and I'm especially a graphic artist type marketers, loving to just loving to sit down at a computer and build brochures. In this day and age, when electronic messaging and other communication is so readily available, it seems kind of peculiar that we'd still be printing and distributing company brochures in those kinds of booklets and folders and so forth. Even more peculiar is that in the past 5 to 7 years or a little longer, most of our clients only care about themselves. That sounds kind of harsh. It sounds kind of mean, but the reality is our world and our culture have really changed. Our clients can Google just about anything they want about our company, about our services, about how we do work. They can check to see if we have licenses by going on to the website and checking that out. Here are some simple facts about your promotional literature. Almost all of your promotional literature is all about you. It's all about your services. It's all about your skills, your training, your certifications, how many trucks you have, the quantity of equipment you have, and it just goes on and on. For most business owners, those managers, those marketing reps, a glossy 4-color folder or pamphlet about your company, it really only serves to stroke your own personal ego. And for those few of you that don't do it for your ego, and there probably are some, you create and you print these marketing materials and you spend a lot of money to do it because you think that you should be doing that. Ego and because you think you should be doing it, they're both wrong. Even your business cards, we usually carry them with us and hand out our business cards. But business cards are yes, they're given out at networking meetings. And often you give out business cards and you keep a tally of how many business cards you gave out and how many you collected. You give them out at chamber events and business networking luncheons and other types of get-togethers. And the more cards you walk away with, the more success you think you had. Rather than do that, just simply follow up and then follow through with the business cards that you actually get. Yes, you get excited if you got to spend time telling people about your company at those networking events, or even at a one-on-one with a plumber or an insurance agent. Telling people about your company, your services, your skills, and your expertise. You thought they were really impressed. And you were impressed that you knew enough information to be able to spout it out. But they probably kept looking for a way to walk away from you. Or they're just smiling nicely and saying, hey, we'll keep you in mind. You know, we know that you believe that you're great, but sadly, they don't really care. Just like your company brochures, your marketing visits tend to be all about you and rarely bring to the prospect what's truly important to them. So regardless, literature, brochures, flyers, business cards, generally, they are all about you. You have to make the topic and the conversation about them. When you do that on a prospect visit or a call, you're going to gain a lot more credibility and ultimately a much warmer relationship. Billy?
Thanks, Dick. What's the best way to incentivize my sales staff? I'm currently working with a few CREST members who are trying to work on new compensation packages, and we discuss this a lot. And it's a really, really big bone of contention between some people. And the best way to answer this is to basically figure out what your tolerance is as an owner. Because there are two main philosophies here. There are the philosophy of, well, I don't want to share the wealth. I'll just pay somebody very comfortably and they're expected to do their job. Or there's what I like to refer to as not sharing the wealth, but shared pain. And shared pain means that early in the year or for the first certain amount of expected sales, there's a very low or a reasonably low commission threshold. Let me start by saying I think it's really important that we talk about the fact that I think commissions are the way to go for sales staff. I'm not a huge believer in total commissions where you have to pay somebody a draw against commission. I do understand the value of that. It keeps your fixed expenses very, very low. But I have a couple of reasons for not truly believing in that. I think a much better motivation is you pay somebody what I call a livable wage, a wage where they can pay their rent or their mortgage and they can feed their family and very, very little else. And then quality of life for them gets determined 100% by their efforts for the additional commissions. So when I talk about shared pain, I mean, let's just say you want your salesman to be a $2 million closer. I would say, like, for the first $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, he should get a very small commission on that. Something that allows him a little bit of extra money. But let's just remember, if you're wanting to close $2 million worth of business, you probably need that first $1 million, $2 million, $3 million of business just to pay your bills. You're not making any money on that. So figure out what your break even is and pay him very little on what your break even is. And then everything above and beyond that, you can have what I call an enhanced commission structure. Let's just say you're going to pay somebody 2 or 3 points. You could take that up to 4, 5, 6 points for anything above and beyond some number where you know everything after the job cost is going in your pocket. Again, let's say you need $1.5 million to break even, right? You're operating and it's costing you $100,000 a month. When you're doing work, you're doing it at 80% profit. So if you do $1.5 million of business, you're going to spend 300,000 to do that. It's going to generate $1.2 million to cover all your costs for the company at 100,000 a month is $1.2 million. That means everything above $1.5 million, for every dollar that comes in the company, theoretically, you're putting 80 cents in your pocket to take home. What better way to incentivize somebody to work really hard at the point when it matters to you than to share that with them? They've shared the pain with you of trying to make sure the company's covered. Now that you're into profit mode, give them more bonus, give them a higher incentive. I have found in the areas that we do this, that you get the greatest buy-in from the sales staff. This works for marketers as well, guys. I mean, I think Dick can attest. The hardest part of a year is the last 5 weeks. The period of time between Thanksgiving and New Year's is a very, very difficult time to keep everybody motivated. Marketers and sales staff are going to tell you, oh, it's really difficult to get in touch with anybody. Nobody wants to focus. They're all worried about the holidays. Yeah, but guess what, guys? In a normal company, you're only making 10% profit at the end of the year. Split the year up into 10% increments. The last 5 weeks equals 10% of the year. The time between Thanksgiving and New Year's is 10% of the year. So theoretically, your entire profit for the year could be made or lost in those 5 weeks. I would want my people to be working as hard as possible because they're going to want to maximize their ability to sign up business in that period of time so that they can get the higher commission. For most of us, our work year starts on January 1st. So as soon as January 1st rolls around, guess what? Now we've got a brand new work year. Their commission would go back down to that shared pain model. So that's why I think a livable salary, nothing extravagant, nothing to make them comfortable, nothing to keep them from working hard. Some shared pain commissions up until some threshold where it is that you're breaking even as a company. And then from there, a much higher incentivized threshold for commissions moving on from there. Thanks, Dick.
Thank you, Bill. Why aren't my marketers producing? I've worked with many restoration business owners over the past dozen or so years, and often they tell me they expect their marketer to visit up to 20 or more clients every single day, Monday through Friday. These owners are insisting on a stop, drop, and roll strategy. It directly addresses the issue of producing, productivity. Their motivation, the owner's motivation for that stop, drop, and roll mentality is usually a demand that they think the more you visit, the better your chances. Kind of like throwing the jelly against the wall and seeing how much of it sticks. We know today, and for the past as many as 5 or 10 years, that relationships are what get you clients and referrals. It's not about the number of visits. It's not about the quantity. It's about the quality. In most markets, there are somewhere between 300 and 500 insurance agents. I'm talking property and casualty insurance agents, maybe even more in some of the bigger cities. The reality is that you will only ever get about 5% of them to send you any work. That's 5%. If there are 500 insurance agents in your market, that's as many as 25 insurance agents that will occasionally or regularly send you work. That's a long ways from 500. 25 is a long, long ways. And in many markets, it's only 300. So maybe that's only what, 15 different possible clients. Since we've proven this over and over and over again, it makes far more sense to qualify the client and decide which ones are never going to send you any work and relegate them off to maybe a once every 6 or 12 months visit, or to a newsletter blast only. And then know which ones probably will or do send you work. And that's very likely somewhere in that 5%. That, by the way, holds true for plumbers also. No restoration marketer can effectively call on as many as 20 times a day times 20 different routes in a month. That's about 400 prospects or clients. And you can't possibly do that. There can't be, you can't bring them any legitimate value. Most of those 400, I just told you, somewhere between 15 and 20 are all that's ever going to send you any work. Most of them are never going to refer a job to you. You are more valuable and better than that to call on them and waste your time. Owners that insist that their marketers visit 20 or more prospects a day, they're busy putting quantity over quality. As I said earlier, a few minutes ago, it's about building quality relationships. It's not about the number of visits. Busy doesn't automatically translate into productive. Many times, the reason why the marketer isn't producing is because the owner's focused on quantity and not on quality, or the marketer is not bringing legitimate value to legitimate clients. As owners, you must have productive marketers, no different than you have any other productive employee. You don't tolerate a production worker slacking on the job, failing to achieve their designated work, so don't accept it from a marketer either. They have to bring in a lot of work regularly. Every full-time marketer rep costs you and your company upwards of $100,000 a year when you factor in all of the related expenses associated with that position. They need to be generating somewhere around $1 million a year in measurable business. It's all about quality. If they're not producing and giving quality to their prospects and clients. And maybe they really need help and know what to say and even what not to say. I'm off my soapbox, Billy.
It's a good soapbox to be on, Dick. A lot of it makes perfect sense. When am I big enough to need a general manager? You know, this is always the big struggle with most companies. I've seen both ends of this spectrum. I've seen companies where the owner is still very, very hands-on and he's generating revenue in the millions of dollars where he should be ceding that over to a general manager. And then I've also seen companies that we work with where there's a huge management structure in place and the company's barely doing enough to justify, let's just say, one person other than the owner being around. So there is a happy medium, and it really depends upon what the owner's purpose is. So if the owner's purpose is to truly be an owner and not be involved in the company, he should have a general manager there as soon as he's profitable and capable of growing. So that could be $1 million company, but as long as you're profitable with you out of the picture, and as long as you're capable of growth, which means you're not going to be taking the money out of the company, whatever profits you make, you're going to reinvest into the company. Absolutely, at that point, hire yourself a general manager. The general manager is going to be you Monday through Friday in that office. Okay. As an owner in the situation I just talked about, you're much more of an investor than you are an owner, where think about like a candy store, where the owner of the candy store is almost always the guy behind the register. The investor is somebody who's passive, not involved in the company, who puts money in and takes money out as it does well. So if that's your mindset and that's what you'd like to do, you need a general manager. You need somebody who's going to ultimately be at the top of that pyramid. Conversely, if you're involved in the day-to-day operations of the company, you probably don't need a general manager unless you're getting into the part of the business where you think that it's overwhelming for you, and you want to be able to have somebody that you can hold accountable above all the other people that you're relying on. Maybe you've got a salesman, maybe you've got a marketer, maybe you've got a production team with a whole bunch of crew leaders on it. Maybe you've got somebody who's doing your office management, and you just want to make sure that there's somebody there that can kind of relate to and hold all those different pieces of the puzzle accountable. That makes sense as well. What size is that? Generally speaking, no pun intended, a general manager is probably needed when you get about $2.5 million a year. I think then the salary and the commission structure that you'd have to pay a really good GM, I think is then justified at that size. Let's face it, a really good GM is probably going to require 6 figures of compensation if you're really treating that position the way it's supposed to be treated. If you're loading all the responsibility on their shoulders and you're giving them autonomy and authority. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're constantly looking over their shoulders, second guessing them, or worse, if you haven't given them the ability to make decisions on their own without having to come to you, you don't need a general manager. You're still acting as the general manager, and all you've got is basically a gopher. But if you've truly given them the autonomy and the authority to be left alone and to make decisions affecting the direction of the company because you trust them and because they have a better feel for those decisions than you do, then that person is acting in your best interest. They probably deserve to be compensated on a level that rewards that. We know that really good marketers, really good salesmen, and even some really good production managers are going to get paid 6 figures in a company that's doing $2 to $2.5 million of work. So your general manager should probably be paid in that same realm as well. Don't consider it a cost for doing business. Consider it a fixed cost, no different than your rent or your insurance. When you get that big, you can't say that it's a luxury anymore. You need to have somebody you can hold accountable. So it's no different than you need to have insurance. You need to have a place to work. You need to have vehicles. You're also going to need to have a general manager. But remember, it all starts with your decision-making process on how involved you want to be. I just gave you the example that if you are going to constantly be hands-on, making all the decisions, you don't need that person until you're $4 or $5 million. But if you are willing to cede some of that control over, probably $2.5 million. And if you think you're just going to be an investor and you don't even want to be around, then $1 million to $1.5 million, absolutely, you're going to want a GM. Okay. If you need additional help with that, I can do a quick assessment of where you stand, and I can ask you probably 5 or 6 questions and be able to guide you in the right direction. Send me an email, Bill at the CREST Network, and I can answer that for you real quick. Thank you, Dick.
Thanks, Bill. This is a pet peeve of mine. What's the difference between being a full service restoration company and being an all services restoration company? The specific differences are really important. To be full service generally means that you do some type of mitigation and some reconstruction or recon or put back. To be all service has a whole different meaning, and I'm constantly frustrated when I see and hear about companies like that. The natural tendency of many business owners is to try to appeal to all buyers, providing everything and anything that people might need. And if you do that, you're probably going to have actually less business, certainly less profitable business. When you specialize and differentiate, you will be much more successful. Offering many things usually creates confusion for the buyer and for your company, a lack of focus for your people, a frustrated staff, and wasted energy. Do you offer water mitigation and sewage cleanup and fire restoration and contents pack out in mold remediation and carpet cleaning and duct cleaning and pressure washing and trauma scene cleanup and reconstruction and electronic restoration? And I can go on, but it gets to be a little ridiculous. Nevertheless, I have seen that level of ridiculousness. I have on my desk or in the drawer on my desk, some what are referred to as line cards. Restoration companies that I visited where they proudly promoted their line card, and their line card was all of those different things that they offered in their services. And one of those particular line cards that I just laughed my head off and shook my head, it had 35 different services that they were proud to offer their customers. That's just bizarre. Think about what you do best. What makes you the most profit? What takes up the most time with the least amount of results? How do you even train and keep skilled people in all those different services? Why are you even trying to be all things to all people? We tend to subscribe to the common idea that expanding our line of services is a sure path to more success. Well, it isn't. What almost always happens is the company wallows in mediocrity, trying to chase every possible market or market type. Specifically, the quality of your service declines, employee morale suffers, resources are wasted, your sales slack off or level off, and confusion abounds within your organization. This mentality debilitates small and medium-sized businesses. It jeopardizes the very roots of their existence and often puts them out of business. Remember back during the 90s, for those of you that are old enough, Apple suffered at that time from an expansive product line, and it almost led to Apple's bankruptcy. Their greatest success is when they eliminated about 75% of their product line and focused on just a very few things. Yes, the challenge is deciding which core services will get the business on track to the success and the fastest and most economical. No matter how broad you consider the appeal of your service, not everybody is going to be interested. We tend to think that if we offer it, they will come. That's really a sample of our ego. Don't waste your time and your money in the wrong places. Identify your target client or target customer. Identify the few narrow, specific services that you want to specialize and offer and be really good at. And then have a marketing campaign that focuses on those core services and enables you to specialize and make your small business really a big success. Thank you, Billy.
Thanks, Dick. And if I could just add one small thing to that, I absolutely agree with you that every company needs to focus on their core service, figure out what that thing is that they're going to do best, and market to that. Both you and I have had a lot of success over the years with our CREST members in finding what we call complementary services. Things that you can do in addition to that core service for the same client. This way, your marketing is still focused on your main core service, yet you have more bites at that same apple. So you're actually making more dollars for every lead that gets generated or every phone call that gets made, rather than going down an entirely different track of business. So I just wanted to make sure I added that in. And that's kind of the difference between being a full service company within a very small core service model and literally offering that checklist of all services. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more.
When do I know it's time to spend money on equipment? Again, this always comes up right around this time of year for two reasons. Number one, people want to chase storms. And when they chase storms, they always assume that they have to go out and grab a whole bunch of equipment. It also comes up around this time of year because we're getting towards the end of the year, and inevitably people are looking at their inventories and they're looking at their cash and they're looking at how much they're going to have to pay Uncle Sam, and they'll make some decisions on whether or not it makes sense to purchase additional equipment. Remember, if you buy things you don't need just to avoid paying Uncle Sam, you have $0 when you're done with that. If you have $1,000 that you don't need to spend and you give Uncle Sam 30 or 40% of that, you're still left with $500, $600, $700 to use properly. So I always say, don't buy anything that you don't already need, regardless of your financial tax implications. That goes for vehicles, that goes for anything that you would make a purchase on, because there's nothing more valuable to a restoration company than having the cash available. That said, when is a good time to buy equipment? Well, the best time to buy equipment is when everybody else is looking to sell it. You know, we've had a couple of inquiries recently about people wanting to buy some equipment, and Dick gave some very salient advice to one of our CREST members. He said, right now is probably not a good time to buy, because with the storms blowing through, and this isn't the only storm, guys, they're still talking about other types of storms coming through, and October is one of the busiest months of storm season. This is probably not a good time to buy equipment because other people are out there buying it. So the price is probably going to stay what I'll call artificially unreasonably high for the next 30 days or so. A really good time to buy would be November 1st through December 31st, not because of the tax implications, but because there'll probably be an oversupply from the suppliers if the storms don't materialize. And number two, all of those guys who went out and bought equipment thinking that there's going to be a big storm and they're going to cash in are not going to cash in. They're going to be looking to sell it to you guys at what they'll consider to be very reasonable prices. Now, if you're super aggressive and you have cash, and you literally drive to the guy's shop with cash, a lot of guys have a tough time turning down cash. So you could probably do very well for yourself if you just wait another 30, 60 days. But do you really need the equipment? How do you know you need portable equipment, for instance? I can make an argument that you very rarely, if ever, need desiccants or generators. I think the ROI, the return on investment for those types of pieces of equipment in our industry is not worth the effort in laying it out. There's an incredible amount of maintenance. Those are very exacting machines when it comes to taking care of them. I would much rather pay a rental company to bring it, and God forbid something doesn't work, they have to swap it out that day. The investment compared to what you get back on it for a job is not worth it unless you're a monster commercial entity. I would much prefer you rent that. So let's just talk about portables. If you are currently renting portables more than twice a quarter, you should look into buying that amount of equipment. If you find yourself twice a quarter running out there and saying, okay, I need 30 air movers, let me rent 30 air movers from my local equipment supplier, you can make that money up in very short period of time. Let's look at that. If you're renting twice a quarter, that means 8 times during the year, you're renting air movers. For 3 or 4 day jobs, that's about 20 days a year that you're renting equipment. Well, for an air mover, you can get your money back after about 10 or 11 days of use on a job. So your return on investment is much greater. Obviously, if you're renting equipment twice, just go out and buy it. Your source and use of that capital is going to be so much greater for you. You're going to get all your money back in 10 tries. Then everything after that for the rest of the year and for all the years to come is pure 100% profit in your pocket, minus, of course, maintenance and handling in the office. Let's think about those lines. If you're not renting equipment currently, you don't have a need to buy more equipment. Dick used a perfect line before when he was talking about something else. He was talking about why you guys do brochures and it's all about ego because you want it to be all about you. Well, guess what? Warehouses full of equipment are only for ego. When I walk into a warehouse, if I see rows and rows of racks filled with equipment, I know that owner's in trouble. And the only reason I know he's in trouble is because I know all his cash is tied up in that warehouse. And I should see as many empty shelves as I see shelves with equipment on it, because then at least I know that equipment's out there spinning. That's the role and the goal of owning equipment, is keeping it spinning. If you're buying equipment just to buy it, you're wasting your money and you're wasting your time. Please be very judicious about this. So in closing, buy it when you need it. When do you need it? You need it if you're renting more than twice a quarter. And I don't mean just twice this quarter. I mean 2 or 3 quarters in a row. And don't buy it now. Wait for this peak to pass and then move on and buy it at the end of the year. Thank you, Dick.
Thanks, Bill. That does conclude our Tuesday morning Q&A webinar we do once a month. I do want to remind you that both Bill and I do regular podcasts. They are both on Spotify and they are available on the public side of thecrestnetwork.com. I hope you will go there and download them and listen to them. There is a lot of really good information on there. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.